Hello, my name is David Marshall, and I am the Director of the University Honors Program, faculty member in English. And I'm delighted that you are here with us today watching the video. We will be talking about the Honors Program's junior level interdisciplinary experience. We have an introductory video to that if you were unable to attend our workshop. And today is about interdisciplinarity and team teaching. And we have two guests that will be with us. Deirdre Landeskog is with us at the moment, and Vanessa Ovaya-Perez will be joining us shortly, and we'll be sort of exploring their experience with the curriculum and the way that interdisciplinarity and team teaching sort of worked together in that space. Before we do that, and I'm going to transition to some slides here. Oh, I think I need to share my screen. You'd think that after 2 years of online, we'd have this all figured out. Okay, so theoretically, and Dieter, maybe you can confirm you see a slide there and not my presentation manager. Oh, good, we have Bailey Benedict coming in. Hi, Bailey, we're just getting started here. So welcome. We're going to be talking about the Honors Program's junior level interdisciplinary experience. I just noted that we have an introductory video that went out in an email, and we'll be hosting that on our website shortly. And today we'll be talking about interdisciplinarity and team teaching with Deirdre Landeskog and Vanessa Ovaya-Perez. Before we get into that, however, I just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of interdisciplinarity and how in the honors program we're kind of rethinking interdisciplinarity a little bit. And then we'll start exploring Deirdre and Vanessa's experience with interdisciplinarity and how team teaching sort of facilitated interdisciplinary approaches to their subject matter. And we'll make sure we have some time for some questions. If a burning question arises, do feel free to put that question in the chat or just unmute and throw it at us. Okay, so in thinking about interdisciplinarity and the benefits of interdisciplinarity, I want to sort of offer several thoughts here. And I'll offer quotations on the right, but what I really want to talk about is the bullet points on the left. Interdisciplinarity has a variety of very real benefits, and sort of research continues to bear this out. And one is that it encourages identification of preconceptions and biases. And the notion here is that when students are encouraged to work in interdisciplinary ways, their assumptions about how knowledge is produced, core concepts, becomes challenged when they encounter disciplines that they may not be familiar with. And so what this enables students to do is begin broadening their understanding of how knowledge is produced, broadening their conceptual categories, and broadening their understanding of how those can be deployed in order to construct knowledge. And so we see this among the benefits that we're hoping to advance in our curriculum. Second, interdisciplinarity, as it says, foregrounds application of knowledge in problem solving. Because often in interdisciplinary learning, students are being encouraged to grapple with the approaches of different disciplines, and the way that students do that most effectively is by sort of using the concepts, using the approaches that are being introduced to them to think about problems, to think about issues, and sort of actualize that learning in ways that enables them to start transferring new knowledge from one space to another. And there's a great deal of research that suggests that that's one of the biggest challenges for students, is making that transfer of learning from one space to another. And so interdisciplinary learning really sort of gives them opportunities to try out new approaches and begin that practice. Third, interdisciplinarity promotes a synthetic approach to knowledge acquisition. Students are very accustomed, due to their training in majors, to work in very particular ways that are often specific to disciplines. In my discipline of literary studies and literary criticism, we sort of train students in critical theory and close reading, and that's how they approach the production of knowledge and research and problem solving. However, if we introduce a physicist into the room, we're going to be offered new ways of constructing knowledge, new processes, new modes of working, and students are encouraged to find ways to bring those different approaches together in new methods that maximize the possibility that each of those different disciplinary areas offers. And the hope is that it's a classic sum is greater than the, or total is greater than the sum of its parts. And we've sort of seen this play out in a variety of our courses, where students begin experimenting with different ways of configuring methodologies in order to achieve ends that they didn't even know were a possibility. And so to that end, maybe there's a degree of empowerment as well. And then finally, I think interdisciplinarity really kind of shifts approaches to teaching towards hands-on approaches. Because faculty are trying to help students to develop conversancy with those new ways of thinking, those new ways of doing. And so methodologies can end up, or pedagogies can end up giving students opportunities to try these out, right? To do them, to make those applications in ways that help them to build knowledge in these different ways. And so it provides an opportunity for teachers to really sort of give students an opportunity to be very active and to be really exploring different ways of working. And so those are just some of the benefits that we see to interdisciplinary teaching, particularly as it's borne out in the honors program with the junior level interdisciplinary experience. Now, interdisciplinarity, there's multiple ways to look at it. And I want to take a look at kind of two definitions. The first is by a scholar named Guo, who was sort of using interdisciplinary approaches in his own work. And he writes, an interdisciplinary approach involves drawing appropriately from several disciplines or separate branches of learning or fields of expertise to redefine problems outside of normal boundaries and reach solutions based on a new understanding of complex situations. Now, this is a very traditional, typical definition of interdisciplinarity, and functionally it's terrific. I think the issue that I take with it is that it sort of obscures the agent. We don't see who is doing it. And I think there's a root assumption here that within this definition, we work interdisciplinarily in a solitary way. So that interdisciplinarity is something that a scholar adopts and executes. Now, that may or may not be true, but I think there's this sort of implicit notion here. And there's a great many disciplines that work interdisciplinarily and do so in solitary ways. So against that, I want to juxtapose this explanation, which is from an unconventional source. It's actually from the state government's Department of Human Resources from Melbourne. And they write, an interdisciplinary approach involves team members from different disciplines working collaboratively with a common purpose to set goals, make decisions, and share resources and responsibilities. Now, this was sort of healthcare oriented, but what I like about this is that it nuances the notion of who is doing interdisciplinary work. And while we can certainly do interdisciplinary work as solitary scholars and researchers, this suggests a way of conceptualizing interdisciplinarity that is collaborative with groups of people or pairs of people. And I think that this is very functional in the honors program and its junior level interdisciplinary experience on two levels. One, the courses are team taught, which enables interdisciplinary work with more than one. It's no longer solitary. It becomes collaborative and provides a collaborative pair an opportunity to set common purpose, goals, and make decisions and share resources and responsibilities, as that quotation indicates. Additionally, the interdisciplinary experience that the honors program offers really encourages faculty to create kind of project and problem-based learning opportunities that we'll be talking about next week in our workshop that are collaborative, so that students are sort of working together from their own disciplinary perspectives, trying to use the disciplinary perspectives brought about in the class, but always reliant on their own ways of knowing and ways of doing that they glean from their majors, in order to come to some satisfactory progress on a project or a problem-based assignment. And so we want to kind of rethink interdisciplinarity here and recognize that while it can be a solitary activity, we can really maximize the possibility for interdisciplinarity and the learning that can come from interdisciplinarity by making this a collaborative activity. And so that's one of the undergirding premises of this curriculum. So that being said, I want to shift gears a little bit and introduce Deirdre Landeskog and Vanessa Ovaya Perez, who taught with us, was it last year, Deirdre? Yes, last year. Vanessa is at another engagement, but will be joining us in a few moments. But Deirdre is a faculty member in the Department of Social Work, and Vanessa is a faculty member in the Department of English. And they collaborated on a course called Belonging Across Borders that was very much about notions of community in border areas. It's a topic that is remarkably relevant to our students in Southern California, many of whom are of Mexican heritage or Central American heritage, who have families that are across borders and really think about themselves in relation to the kind of the borders that define their own communities. I'll also add that in the sort of conversations that I've had with students that participated in Deirdre and Vanessa's course, they were incredibly enthusiastic about the experience, had great things to say about both Deirdre and Vanessa, and felt like they learned an awful lot, not just about the sort of the topic of sort of community and border areas, but also about developing ways of thinking differently. And that was interestingly something that they did not anticipate as a part of the experience. But welcome, I'm really glad you're here, Deirdre. We will welcome Vanessa when she arrives. As you know, I have some questions that we'll tackle, but I do want to give you an opportunity to just offer some initial thoughts about your experience of teaching in the junior level interdisciplinary experience. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much for having me here today and for supporting us in developing this class. It was an excellent experience, and I'm also just want to say my apologies. I'm getting some messages that my internet is unstable, so I hope that you'll raise your hand or wave at me if I'm frozen.
We're good so far.
Yeah, this was just a really great experience, and just to be clear, Vanessa and I did not know each other very well before we embarked on this adventure. It was sort of like a setup. We have a mutual friend on campus who kind of suggested that we might be a good match, and it was fantastic. So right off the bat, I'd just like to say you don't have to partner with somebody you've been besties with for 10 years or you've already worked with. It was just a phenomenal experience for me as an instructor, and I'm really glad to hear that it was good for the students, because it was great from my perspective.
Yeah. And it's maybe worth noting that for anybody watching the video, or Bailey, if you're interested, if you're uncertain who to work with, you can reach out to us in the honors program at honors@csusb.edu and let us know kind of who you are, your department, what your teaching and research interests are. And we've got a bevy of student assistants who will immediately start sort of scouring faculty profile pages, looking for people that might be a good match, and we can make introductions. So by all means, we can be a matchmaker in that process, and so do feel free to take us up on that. So, yeah. All right. Any other thoughts before I start throwing questions at you?
No, let's go ahead.
Okay, let's dive in. And then when Vanessa arrives, we'll rope her into this as well. So the first question is really about conceptualization. And how did you and Vanessa go about conceptualizing your course together? Can you describe the process you went through?
Yes, so we actually spent a lot of time before we even started developing a syllabus or whatever, getting to know each other and getting to know each other's interests. We knew we were both interested in immigration and both the migratory experiences and then the experiences of people after migration for many generations. And so we spend a lot of time just getting to know each other, talking with each other about the books that we were reading, the scholars that we were following, and just kind of thinking about how we approach the topic, both from our own unique perspectives and from our discipline perspectives.
Excellent. Were there particular challenges to that, or
Yeah, I think not challenges, maybe so much as surprises. I come from the field of social work, which is by its nature interdisciplinary. We're kind of the stealers of or the borrowers of academia. We borrow from all these different fields. We do have some of our own scholarly work, but we borrow from psychology, from sociology, from all the health sciences, from public administration, from political science. I think the one place that we don't often borrow from is English. And so Vanessa is from English, and I was really excited to kind of see what that might bring to the mix. But, back to your question, what I found really interesting when we first met is that we didn't use the same scholarly materials. We weren't reading the same books. We didn't, it seemed like we had nothing in common, sort of from a scholarly perspective, except that we were both interested in immigration and really immersed in it. But there was very little overlap. And so I was kind of surprised. She would throw out, what about this author? And I didn't know who that was. And I would throw about, what about this author? And she didn't know who it was. And so it was a little disorienting, like maybe I'm doing it wrong. But actually what it ended up being is opening, kind of hopefully, for sure me, hopefully both of us, to this whole new way of thinking about immigration that we just, hadn't been exposed to before.
that's interesting. I can see a lot of potential there that maybe we can sort of pick up later on. So I mean, you've talked about this a little bit, but how did you explore your different disciplinary approaches, and what they might contribute to an experience in the classroom?
So I noticed right off the bat, and Vanessa's not here, so I can say whatever I want about Vanessa, who is fantastic. If you get the chance to work with Vanessa, you should take it. I noticed right off the bat that when Vanessa was talking about her work and her approach, it was very often rooted in stories, and these really deep, interesting, engaging, diverse stories about migration, about immigrants. And I'm sure she has stories about other things, but she's very, very based in storytelling. And I am the opposite. I am based in the law and the policy. And, I didn't really know this about myself until she started highlighting it, but I'm really focused on the letter of the law and what happened politically and what happens economically. And maybe, I'm definitely interested in people's stories, but that wasn't what I was bringing to this class. I was bringing policy and process and analysis to this class. And so that was a big difference.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and it seems like an opportunity there to, and you've talked about this already, to really kind of discover other ways of thinking about the topic. I'm wondering if I can sort of throw a question at you that I didn't throw at you in my email. Has it shifted at all the way you think about the way you do your work?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah. Completely. And a lot of that has to do with seeing how the students reacted to. I can tell them all the details about a policy or a process, and they inherently know whether this policy or this process was fair or unfair or discriminatory. But man, when they hear about the policy and then they read the story, or hear someone's personal experience in their own words, it just makes all the difference in the world. And so that was really cool for me.
That's exciting. That's exciting. When Vanessa arrives, we'll come back to this, and we'll get her sense of the other side of that relationship. But until she does, what kind of challenges did you encounter in working together to try to create an interdisciplinary experience?
Mhm. Yeah, I think a couple of challenges. Well, the challenge I would say for me is that um, we picked readings that would give it both a kind of dry scholarly approach to a topic and a engaging, interesting story. And you can guess where the dry readings came from. They all came from me. And so one of the kind of challenges we had was getting students to look at both, because of course, who doesn't want to be engaged in a great story? I do too. But also to look past it and see, okay, what's happening in the policy world, what's happening in the administration of the immigration policy or the law, or socioeconomically, that's creating this story. And often those stories were very difficult and painful. And so rather than just looking at getting caught up in the difficulty of the story, because immigration stories are often really challenging, taking a step back and putting on that analytical lens and saying what's happening here behind the scenes that even the protagonist of the story can't see happening.
Wow, that's fascinating. So that the work that you were bringing into the course really ended up sort of providing a kind of I don't know, sort of a kind of a support structure underneath the narratives as a way of understanding the larger issues that are
Mhm.
all functioning beneath the narrative that we might encounter.
Mhm. Yeah,
Wow, that's really cool.
yeah. Um, that was really cool. And I think one of the challenges that we encountered related to that is that US immigration policy in particular is really unfair.
Hmm.
It's unfair, it's discriminatory. It has been for hundreds of years. It's a real downer. And the stories that people tell, there are, of course, wonderful stories about immigrant experiences, but a lot of what gets told are the hard parts. And so the part that was challenging about this class is not making it a downer, about,
Wow.
helping them to see, no, people have agency, they have activism. And so that was a part that we really focused on, to make sure that we weren't just telling the hard parts, that we were also helping students see where they could go with this difficult material.
Right, that's interesting. And Vanessa, welcome. Um, um, yeah, I'm very grateful that you're here. We've as you know, we've sort of gotten started and introduced you and Deirdre. So Bailey, anybody watching the video, this is Vanessa Ovaya Perez, who has very graciously joined us today, cutting short a lunch meeting at the Huntington Library, where what's your title? Are you a visiting scholar or resident scholar?
Yeah, I am a long-term fellow. So it just basically means I'm here for a year. And so I'm in residency here. I have an office here and I'm doing research.
That's exciting. Well, Vanessa, I want to give you a chance to sort of share any general thoughts you have about having taught in the junior level interdisciplinary experience, and then we'll sort of touch base with a couple questions that Deirdre and I have been talking about. But just any initial thoughts?
Yes. So first of all, hey, Deirdre. I had such a positive experience as an honors course teacher, working for this level. It was great to be able to do interdisciplinary work and course building, and to do something that was collective, right? Sometimes being a professor can feel like a very lonely task. Because even when you're up in front of the students, sometimes you're talking to students or you're collaborating with students, but there's always a divide, right? On some level. And so when you have another teacher that you're working with and you're team teaching, and it really is a collective team effort, that feels really good. And I learned a lot. The particular students I was teaching were amazing. And I got to know them so well just because of the nature of the course. We're doing an immigrant inquiry project. So through their projects, we got to know them so well and had the privilege of hearing so many of their immigrant journeys, their immigrant heritage. And that was so special. So
It
yeah,
sounds like it.
that's
Yeah.
kind of my initial thoughts there.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, from your perspective, sort of how you went about exploring the different disciplinary approaches and what they might contribute to a course.
Yeah, so I'm assuming Deirdre already got a chance to speak on this a little
She
bit.
did, a
So
little bit, yes.
okay, so I don't want to cut the line, especially because I got here a little late. So I would say we had to get to know what sort of things are important, the sort of goals that you would have for different types of students. You know, in my case, it's literature students and literary studies. In Deirdre's case, it's social work. And because I had never personally taken a social work class in my life, I had to learn and listen to Deirdre and understand what her goals are when she's teaching a class and what she really wants students to come away with. And then once we have that big picture idea of kind of how our disciplines work, like what the sort of task is, and we were able to communicate that with one another, we were able to go forward into the sort of micro decisions of planning the class. But what we found was that a lot of these topics fit together quite nicely, especially with a topic like immigration. You know, with literature, you have a lot of the testimonies of folks who are immigrants or come from immigrant families. And then Deirdre would bring all of this sort of research and theoretical perspectives, and also in terms of social science theoretical perspectives, and also you know, different methodologies for supporting immigrant communities, all that stuff that sort of goes hand in hand with the topic.
That's really interesting. In Deirdre's response, she was talking about how she saw her readings as providing a sort of structure underneath the narratives to describe the kind of systemic maneuverings that happen that inform the the narratives, right? And so I'm interested in the way that you've sort of flipped that a little bit and not disagreed with it so much as observed that what Deirdre brought was also an understanding of immigrant experience and the ways that immigrant communities have sort of navigated systems. So what's striking to me is that each of you has sort of, in some ways, kind of promoted the other's approach and sort of said, and what I did was provide a context for that. And so there's a sort of reciprocal sort of acknowledgement of the contextualizing role that each of you played.
Yeah,
Sort of
I
interesting
mean,
to
it
me.
is interesting. I don't think one of them was primary over the other, and I think that's what made it successful too. So, I mean, you know, they provide in their own way, they're both contexts for this larger issue of you know, immigration in America. And so I feel like, and really the centerpiece of the whole class wasn't even my readings, and it wasn't Deirdre's readings either. And Deirdre and I came into that understanding. The center of the class, or the learning in the class, was reciprocal between the students because they were sharing their own very unique and personal experiences. So in some ways it was team teaching, like we were teachers, but our students were teachers too, because of it was an immigrant inquiry project. So it's all about their projects. And at halfway through the semester, we kind of, you know, turned off our teaching hat even more and were there as supporters, just supporting that research project as much as possible, providing resources and trying to understand students, get to know their projects and their perspectives.
That's cool. And it really gets at this notion of interdisciplinarity as an approach that is collaborative, that we were talking about a little bit before you arrived. And just to sort of throw another question at you, Vanessa, that Deirdre's commented on, what challenges did you encounter in trying to develop the interdisciplinary experience?
I would say, well, one challenge was not assigning too much reading because, you know, you could go crazy. I mean, technically it is 2 courses, right? It's 2 courses, but because they're run together, it can feel extra heavy, if that makes any sense.
It does.
You know, we have one syllabus, so, you know, I think that, and then for students to just read and read and read on one topic that much, if as though they were 2 separate classes, I think we tried to reduce reading, especially at the beginning. We learned that pretty early on. It got to a point where students, I don't remember if they said to us that they were overwhelmed by the reading, but they kind of, we could see that they were. And so we found ways to kind of reduce reading or only assign parts of reading that we had planned, to sort of adjust. And you have to keep in mind too, this was an online course during a pandemic. So that's also part of it too. So that was a challenge, you know, being mindful of where students are at and trying to sort of meet that moving target of how much can students handle.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I think that many of our faculty pairs have tried to navigate. You know, the university has guidelines for how many hours of homework for every hour in class, and I think where that has become challenging is that with 2 classes, it can feel like a lot. It would amount to 12 hours a week of homework. And you know, we're working with a population of students who are used to getting the 12 hours of homework done in 8 hours because they've always been highly motivated, highly engaged, high achieving. But yeah, so that's definitely something that's come up. I'm curious about, and Deirdre, maybe we sort of shift over to you and give Vanessa a break. I'm curious about how team teaching mitigated any challenges that you felt with an interdisciplinary approach. And to what extent team teaching, bless you, Vanessa, to what extent team teaching sort of facilitated interdisciplinarity?
Oh gosh, I mean, just so many ways. I think the great thing was just having another instructor in the Zoom room all the time who could draw out a thread that students were starting down in a way that maybe I couldn't, or who could jump in and redirect when maybe we got off track. Like the team, like, you know, if we could have high-fived over Zoom, we would have, I think, quite a few points. And the other part is that you've always got this other person there when you're team teaching in the room to hold up the mirror, so that when I start talking about something that's, you know, very established in my field of expertise, that's, we're certain we've got it right, to have somebody else say, well, but wait a minute, because remember we were talking about whatever. And I think, you know, Vanessa just does that exceptionally well, really, in a nuanced way, so that students could bring in all of their experiences in their lives and in their you know, kind of own families, and feel like there was a place for it in that classroom. I'm not sure I said that succinctly. Vanessa, maybe you could chime in, and maybe if you could follow where I was going with that. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I learned so much from your teaching style, which is different from mine in productive ways, I think. And also, I think it was really helpful that we were there to hold a mirror to each other, and just like you said, be able to question, even, and I'm not saying like question as in call out, but even like questions like, I don't understand exactly what you mean by this.
Yes,
Can you
that's it.
explain
Yeah.
more? So to, sometimes we have things in our field that, like you're saying, they're so established that sometimes it feels like they go without explaining. And so when you're working in that interdisciplinary setting with people who are not from literature or not from social work, and you actually have to take time to explain those concepts, there's a deeper level of learning that happens. And sometimes it's like I get to be the student too that asks those questions. And sometimes my honors students are slow to even ask questions that seem like they should already know, but I'm not ashamed to ask the question that seems dumb or obvious. So I'm happy to be that person sometimes, and that I think helped a lot. I think when it came to interdisciplinary teaching, I think that one of the big things that I learned from Deirdre is that, you can do these really neat, like sort of, you have this methodology where you can do sort of real world sort of skits. I don't think skits is the right word, but have students sort of pretend to be in a situation where they are a social worker, or where they're navigating an immigration process. Like she had one like map that she had students do, and she said, okay, now imagine you come from this or that immigration situation and you have to navigate the US immigration system, and get in teams and do this exercise. And I feel like in literature, I don't do like a lot of those activity type things. I'm used to, oh, okay, I'm going to think of some, discussion questions, and I'm going to have students contribute their own discussion questions, and we're just going to converse, and sometimes we'll break them into groups, sometimes we'll be in big groups, sometimes we'll be in pairs, but that's kind of it. That's kind of like the formula. So it was really exciting to see kind of interesting teaching strategies that I think I could do with literature students if I was more creative and I had that idea, those types of ideas. And so now I've learned some cool activities and stuff.
That's excellent.
And then back, along those same lines, Vanessa would very often stop us in class and say, let's do a close reading of this. And it occurred to me that very often in social work, we're just busy doing. We're doing, and maybe we don't stop enough and take a close reading of much of anything. And so that for me was like, wow, I get to just stop and think about this for a minute and process it for a minute. And so that was really an exciting part of class.
That's fascinating to me that in a process of sort of employing discipline-specific methodologies that sort of help students see that, right, through modeling it even, that it becomes a real sort of learning moment for the faculty involved. And sort of learning, I mean, Vanessa, you sort of framed it as sort of pedagogical methods, and Deirdre, you're suggesting that it's not just pedagogical methods, it's actually like, on some level, like scholarly procedural methodology.
Mm-hmm.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it's pedagogical, but it is also like the reverse is true too, because we as literature scholars, we don't just have to think of the text in terms of, what can we say about it? How can we analyze it? We can also weirdly like do these like sort of real world applications of things if we take it there, but we often don't, right? So yeah, I think
So really everybody in the room is learning,
yeah.
which is exciting to me. So we've got just a few minutes, and so I'm just going to throw one final question to you, and then Bailey, if you've got any questions, do feel free to jump in. But I wonder if you just spend a moment reflecting, sort of in general terms, kind of what the challenges and benefits were of team teaching for each of you.
Hmm. Do you want to start, Deirdre, or I can start? Okay, I'll start. I think so. The benefits were I had a lot of fun. I think that's always my favorite benefit. I had so much fun, and I thrive in, like, I think, a team environment a lot of time. I'm extra motivated. I'm the kind of person that likes to go to like fitness classes. I can never exercise on my own. So like getting to work with Deirdre, getting to talk to her, chat with her about her day, and feel like if there's a challenge, we can face it together with a student that, that happens every semester, right? You have challenges that come up with teaching, but usually it's like all on me to figure it out, right? And so it's really nice having Deirdre. We would like go get brunch and figure out our things, and we would I just had so much fun talking to her, and yeah, being a team. It was fun. I had a great time. I think the downside is that it does take more time. It's not very efficient. It's not the most efficient way of teaching, especially after you've been teaching for a long time, like both me and Deirdre. So, if we had just gone along with one of our syllabi or one of our routines, it would have been like snappy, it would have been done. It wouldn't have taken so many, meetings and hours of planning and discussions and getting to know each other's disciplines. So it takes a lot more time and work. So even weirdly, like you would think, oh, with two people, there'd be less work or something, but it's not really less work. You do get a course release, so that helps, but it's not less work because you have two people at it. It takes more time and more planning. But it is more fun. Like I said, it is more fun, especially to shake up the monotony or the loneliness of teaching on your own. So, and it adds some novelty to teaching too, because I hadn't really done it before. I taught like under other people, right? And I'd always had that experience of like, when you're in graduate school, being a TA, right? And that is not the same. It's not the same when you're actually collaborative and like you're on the same plane as someone else and you're learning about their stuff. So I had never had an experience like that, and it was really fun. It was novel, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Excellent. Deirdre, how about you?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It was really an opportunity for me to revisit my teaching, both from a content perspective and pedagogically, to look at how am I teaching, and to kind of reset and learn. And I would say it's really changed my teaching in my other classes now, having a chance to learn from another really fantastic instructor. Vanessa created a podcast every week for our class. Like, that is way beyond me, but I'm doing tiny bits, like she's really great at it. And so I guess, especially during the pandemic where things were rough, it was a great experience to have somebody else to learn from and to feel like I could grow a little bit as an instructor, even as I was creating this new class.
All right. Well, thank you. And Bailey, thank you for being here. Feel free to send me any questions you have. I can always forward them, or I'm sure Deirdre and Vanessa would be open to you emailing them directly. But I know, Deirdre, you also need to go, so we will end there. I want to thank both of you, Deirdre and Vanessa, for taking time to talk to us about your experience. I'm glad you had a good experience. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. So good seeing you both.
Good to
Have a
see
nice
you.
week.